Hey there and welcome back to another Miraculous Ladybug Season 4 discussion. And with more and more episodes delving into Adrien's family dynamic, plus with the finale titled The Last Attack of Shadowmoth, the more I've been thinking that it's really only a matter of time before we wrap up Gabriel Agreste's villain arc of the show and likely move on to something a bit more fresh. Season 4 has actually been pretty good in my opinion, and has some pretty cool episodes that have kept things fresh, but it's definitely time to move on to greener pastures and try to revitalize the show before it becomes completely stale. So, obviously, that means old mate Gabe's finally going to get his hands on those damn Miraculouses and bring his wife back. And obviously, something bad's going to happen and he'll be all, Adrien, I'm sorry, I'll help you save the day. And then hopefully he'll go to prison, but honestly, I could see him just apologizing and Marinette and Adrien just being all, no problem, man. I mean, Adrien has big doormat energy anyway, and Marinette simps Adrien, so if he forgives, she forgives. But all this talk of forgiveness has got me thinking about what a deeply terrible father Gabriel Agreste is, and how Adrien's experienced severe emotional neglect and abuse for like his whole life. Seriously, this dude's such a bad parent, it affects me on a spiritual level. And also, his wife can't be any better than him, like at all. Need proof? Watch Wishmaker. So today I want to run through the parenting style of the Agreste family and truly illuminate what an irredeemable skid mark of a man Gabriel is, and that perhaps Emily's not as innocent as she seems. For more on that though, I did make a video talking about the future of Emily Agreste, so check that out if you're interested in that in a little bit more detail. Now let's go back and try to paint a complete picture of Adrien's life. The show tries to paint this picture of Gabe, Emily and Adrien as this almighty family unit who are super close and affectionate with each other. And I guess that probably is true to an extent, but I don't know. Wishmaker gave me the heebie-jeebies about this whole thing when it was revealed that Adrien has literally never had any childhood dream of his own, and has never been in a position to have his own dreams or hopes for his future, only desiring to be what his parents want him to be. Now to me this indicates one of three things. Either one, Adrien is completely codependent on his parents and depends on them for everything, and based on his actions trying to break free of his father's influence throughout the entire run of the show, I doubt this is the case. Which brings us to option 2, his parents are controlling and never really gave him a chance to be whoever he wanted to be and do what he wanted to do. Or 3, he's a senti monster controlled by his mother and thus he always did what she told him to do. And since she went into a coma, he's broken free, so to speak. Although for the purpose of this video, let's just ignore that whole third theory for the time being. Maybe I'll do a video on that one day. And let's talk about how his parents are most likely controlling. And I mean next level controlling. We'll start with the obvious, Wishmaker. Now the whole point of that episode was to show that Adrien really didn't have any direction he wanted to take his life because his father's always had his life planned out for him. Thus, when everybody talks about their childhood dreams, he doesn't remember having one at all. Now this brings into the question, what kind of childhood did this kid have that he had no dreams whatsoever? For reference, the earliest childhood dream I can remember having, I was 4 and I wanted to be a dinosaur. And he couldn't even think of something like that when Ladybug questioned him on it. He had no clue whatsoever. How strictly regimented does a child's life need to be to have literally no dreams for their future? Just the knowledge they have to follow the path their parents set out for them? Yikes! And then when he actually gets hit with Wishmaker's magic, he reveals that his dream was to be whatever his parents wanted him to be. And the associated memory of that is him in his crib. So essentially he's an infant or a toddler. So he's had no childhood dreams since he was a baby in the cot, and that dream was to do whatever his parents wanted. That sounds like a very well-adjusted parenting style to me. I've seen people rationalize this as him being devoted to his parents, but honestly it seems more like brainwashing. Like there's loving your parents and listening to them, and then there's obeying their every whim from the very day you were born to the point that you have no conscious memory of ever having a dream outside of the life they created for you. And even within the confines of the life they've picked out for him, he has no dreams. There's no, I want to be the best model, or I want to be a fencing champion. It's just blank. There's something seriously wrong here. And moving on from his infancy, we come to Adrien's troubled childhood. Now, we don't really have a complete picture of what it was like, but from what I can see, it was very lonely. Unlike the majority of his peers, he didn't go to school, but was instead homeschooled. And don't get me wrong, I'm not dissing homeschool. Do what works for you. But I'm pretty sure that if you homeschool your kids, you're supposed to ensure that they get the appropriate levels of interaction with other kids. But it doesn't seem like he did, because his only friends that we know of that existed before he snuck out and started attending school in season 1 were Chloe and Felix. Now, we know that Chloe's a pretty awful person at this point who doesn't care one lick about anybody but herself. And then there's his cousin who doesn't even live in Paris, and so he rarely sees him. And this kid is described as being his best friend, although considering he had 2 friends, that's really not much of a distinction. And it turns out he's pretty bad as well, although that might be due to the fact that he too is a lonely fella. And his close friend and cousin Adrien did not turn up to his dad's funeral. So maybe that's why he tried to sabotage his life. I know I would be a bit upset at this turn of events, and honestly, it's actually Gabe's fault again here, because I'm pretty sure he made the decision not to attend. Bit rude, mate. He was only your brother-in-law. I hope he at least sent one of his minions there so he could Skype call in, unless he hated the dude, in which case, maybe he was popping a bottle of champagne. Maybe a future Felix episode can enlighten us about this. And also, on top of all this, he cold shoulders the kid from the get-go and has an awkward stare down. Yes, he knows they want the rings, but still, Jesus, this is his nephew. But moving back to Adrien's troubled childhood, those were his only 2 friends. From birth to what, age 14? That was it. At least nobody else that we know of. And these friends were a family friend, an actual family. They weren't allowing him to step outside their comfort zone to find new friends elsewhere. Honestly, it's a miracle he was actually able to make friends when he turned up at school. And on top of this, Gabriel seemingly goes full on dance mum and forces his son into modelling and puts him on an intense schedule that includes piano lessons, fencing, Chinese classes, and I assume heaps of other things, leaving him with little time for himself and no chance to leave the house on his own for recreational purposes. I mean, by the time we meet Adrien in the Origins episode, I'm pretty sure he's already a famous model, so yeah, it's safe to say this lifestyle's been going on a long time. Most likely, whilst his mum was still around, so she can have some demerit points for this one too. So now, on their parenting scoreboard, we have completely suppressed any desire to be independent from his birth, completely socially isolating him and only allowing him to access approved children, and now, strictly scheduling his life. And I know it's a pretty minor thing, but in the episode The Bubbler in Season 1, Adrien references that his dad's gotten him the same pen for 3 years in a row. For his birthday. How lame can you be? The kid literally has a rock wall, basketball hoop, arcade games in his bedroom, and this is the best Gabe can do? And Emily was around then as well. She's supposed to be an angel, isn't she? Couldn't she give a hint to her husband that giving him a pen for 3 years is a turd thing to do? And then literally the first year he has a birthday without his mum, his dad doesn't even bother to pick out a gift himself and sends Natalie to do it. What a muppet! Hell yeah! Parent of the Year awards! Let's go! And then that brings us to the events of the show. So we know that Emily smooth-brained herself into a coma using the Peacock Miraculous, even though it was clearly making her sick. And so she disappeared. Also, side note, disappeared? What? Is this public knowledge? Did Gabriel buy off the cops? Because surely they'd search his house. In things like this, isn't the spouse the number one suspect? Do you think in universe there are conspiracy theorists that think he murdered his wife? Or that she murdered her twin sister and stole her identity and had to murder her brother-in-law to cover it all up? I could imagine these theories popping up on a Reddit conspiracy subreddit in the Miraculous verse. Actually, just check the wiki, it's been stated that they had a funeral for her, so I guess they thought she got sick and died. Still, a bit mysterious. Wouldn't you think they'd have a coroner come and investigate? You know, because they wouldn't have gone to a regular doctor, I guess. And she was supposedly young and healthy. And how are they going to explain her randomly coming back to life? Surprise, she's not dead! Does Shadowmoth just expect he's going to have to take over Paris and eventually the world so that no one questions him? Or are they going to run away to rural China and that's why Adrien has to learn Mandarin? Oh well, enough tangents, let's get back to it. Anyway, we know she went into a coma and it was covered up, and this is apparently when Gabriel became even worse, or at least stopped hiding his controlling ways and just openly forced his son to obey him. Now, I'm not going to recap the entirety of seasons 1 to 4 here, but long story short, Gabriel schemes to torment many of Adrien's new friends and acquaintances, simply so he can get his hands on the Miraculous and get his wish to revive his wife. And these schemes often put Adrien and a bunch of other children into direct danger. Seriously, what an awful, awful man. And in certain episodes he goes full serial killer, like when he decides to send Alia's family into space, or when he akumatizes his own son and tries to force him to kill Ladybug, or literally the majority of his schemes. The dude's unhinged. So yeah, this paints a very bad picture of old mate Gabe, a controlling and possessive father, and a borderline serial killer supervillain who's willing to pay any price in order to bring back his beloved wife. And I'm going to be real with you, she's surely no better. Yes, Adrien describes her as being lovely, but he describes his dad as being good until his mum died. And yet, take a look at his childhood. There's got to be so much more to the story. She's shrouded in such mystery, and it would be a really cool twist for her to be much worse than Gabriel. Clearly her and Adrien had a close relationship, which is good, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was an extreme over-possessive relationship. Think shows like Smothered. And that she was completely dedicated to turning him into the perfect child/human. I mean, the way that Adrien used to live his life before she died, and now, is such a contrast. Because Gabe has really put on the brakes when it comes to the controlling stuff since his wife died. Before, he was not allowed to attend school, had like 2 friends he regularly saw, and was under a pretty strict life plan. Now he attends school, is allowed recreational time occasionally, and has heaps of friends. It's not perfect, but aside from the supervillainy, in my opinion, Gabe has improved his parenting since his wife was put in the fridge. And the fact that Adrien's actually felt able to rebel since his mother died speaks volumes. Maybe her affection was enough to keep him happy. Or maybe he felt tremendous guilt at the prospect of carving out a future of his own. Obviously, he didn't really think about it all that much because, once again, no childhood dream. But even on a subconscious level, like obviously Gabe still really sucks, but how bad must it have been before for this to be an improvement on his life? Plus, for even more on Emily being the true rotten egg, isn't she the one who was friends with Andre originally? And he's a turd. Yes, he helped Zoe, but remember, Zoe is Audrey's daughter. Of course he's going to be nice to her. He's a doormat for Audrey. He isn't really nice to other people he meets, and he was literally ready to fire Chloe's only friend's dad on his daughter's instructions. He can be nice to people on his level, but the guy is not a man of the people. Plus, her sister seems dodgy, very manipulative, and scheming if you ask me. And considering how close the sisters are suggested to have been, it wouldn't be surprising if she's similar. Not to mention her nephew's a brat. We've already covered why that might be the case, but it could also be totally plausible he's just an arse, and Adrien was oblivious just like he was with Chloe. Plus, look at who she married. A man with extreme villainous ambitions that's totally okay with sacrificing countless lives, including children, to get what he wants. Seems a bit suspicious to me. So yeah, before I actually wrote this out, I didn't really think about how terrible these 2 parents must have been. But when you break it all down, they're truly awful. No matter which way you slice it, they're bad parents, and I still think there's going to be a villain twist in there somewhere. But I could also see the writers just brushing over this and pretending Emily at least is just a paragon of virtue and pretend Adrien's childhood doesn't exist at all. Pretty lame, but I guess all his loneliness means nothing, am I right? Also, I'm a bit worried Gabe's going to get a half-baked forgiveness arc, or at least won't have many consequences. It is miraculous after all. But I guess we'll have to see on that front. And that brings us to the end of the video, and as always, those were just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think about the Agreste parents? Am I being too harsh? Not harsh enough? Make sure to leave a comment and let me know.